It happened on a warm Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of a public park where families were playing, joggers were running, and birds chirped peacefully in the trees. The sky was clear, the sun cast a soft golden light over everything, and nobody expected anything unusual. But for one young black woman named Ayanna, everything was about to change in the most shocking way. Ayanna was smart, composed, and carried herself with quiet confidence. She worked at the city courthouse and was known for helping people who couldn't afford legal advice. That day, she was supposed to meet her mentor under the large oak tree in the center of Lincoln Park, the same place they had met a dozen times before. She wore a black blouse and a sky-blue skirt, her hair natural and her head held high. What she didn't know was that two officers had been watching her from their cruiser as she walked across the park, minding her own business. The officers were already on edge from a recent call that turned out to be a false alarm. Their mood was sour, and their eyes seemed to search for something, or someone, to make an example out of. When they saw Ayanna standing alone under the tree checking her phone, they approached her. "Hey, what are you doing here?" One of the officers barked, already with his hand near his holster. Ayanna looked up, calm but puzzled. "I'm waiting. For someone. Is there a problem?" They didn't like her tone. Not because it was rude, it wasn't, but because it wasn't afraid. "Let's see some ID," the second officer snapped. Ayanna calmly reached into her bag and handed over her ID. The first officer took it, glanced at it, and chuckled under his breath. Fancy job title. "Assistant legal advisor, huh?" He smirked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, that's right." But instead of handing her ID back, they asked more questions. Questions that had nothing to do with her job, or anything she had done. Then they told her she matched the vague description of a suspicious person reported earlier. Ayanna's heart started to race, but she didn't show it. "I've been coming here for years. I haven't done anything wrong." One of the officers walked behind her. The other one pulled out a rope from the trunk of their cruiser. "You're gonna stay put until we figure this out," one of them said. Before she could react, she was being tied tightly around her torso to the tree. Not handcuffed, not detained properly, but tied with rope like an animal. People started to stare. Some gasped. A few took out their phones and began to record. Ayanna looked straight ahead, her eyes fixed, her body still. She didn't scream, she didn't plead, but her heart was pounding. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew this moment was going to matter. Across the park, an elderly woman dropped her ice cream cone. A child asked his mother, "Why? Is that lady tied to a tree?" The officers laughed as if it was a joke, as if nothing about what they were doing could possibly be wrong. One of them leaned over and whispered something to the other, and they both chuckled. That's when a sleek black car rolled up near the park entrance. It stopped quickly but quietly. The door opened, and out stepped a tall woman in a navy suit with a silver badge hanging at her side. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Every step she took toward the scene was filled with purpose. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Because when the two officers turned to see who was approaching, their laughter died instantly. Their faces drained of color. She was the state attorney general, and she knew exactly who Ayanna was. But just as the officers stepped back, unsure of what to say, a new voice broke the tension from the other side of the park. A young teenage boy had seen the entire thing unfold. He had been sitting at the edge of the fountain, keeping his distance, not wanting to get involved. But what he saw lit a fire in his chest. This was the same teen who, just a week earlier, had done something simple, kind, and powerful on a crowded city bus. He had given up his seat for a pregnant white woman. She looked exhausted. He didn't ask for thanks. He just stood up and offered it with a smile. That woman handed him a note. Before she got off, he hadn't opened it yet. Something about that moment had felt different, important. Now, here he was again, caught in another moment that would change everything. And this time he wasn't just going to stand and watch. As the Attorney General reached Ayanna and laid a hand gently on her arm, the tension in the park thickened. Phones were still recording, strangers were whispering, and the two officers, once smug, were now trembling in confusion and fear. What happened next would shock the entire city, but it was what the teenage boy did moments later. And the note? He would finally open, that would ripple across the country. And right as the Attorney General opened her mouth to speak, the sound of more sirens began to fill the distance. What she said next left everyone speechless, but we'll get to that. Because what happened before that moment, and everything that followed, is a story you won't forget. The sound of those approaching sirens sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. The two officers stiffened. They exchanged a look that said more than words ever could. Something had gone very wrong, and they were no longer in control of the scene. Ayanna remained tied to the tree, her back straight, face calm. But her eyes didn't blink. She was holding everything in. The Attorney General, who stood beside her now, turned her head slightly and said in a cool, clear voice, "Untie her, now." But the officers didn't move. One of them, the taller one, tried to smile as if to charm his way out of the situation. "Ma'am, this is all a misunderstanding. We were just trying to keep things under control until we confirmed her identity. You know how it is." The Attorney General didn't respond right away. She just looked at him, silent, unmoved. Then she repeated, this time even quieter, "Untie her." The younger officer began fumbling with the rope, suddenly all thumbs. His hands shook, and the knot that had been tied so confidently now refused to come undone. It was clear this was more than just a moment of discomfort. It was fear. Not fear of getting caught, but fear of who they had chosen to mess with. Ayanna finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "You tied me to a tree. You didn't ask questions. You assumed I was a threat. You made a decision. And now you want to pretend it never happened." The Attorney General didn't say anything, but the weight of Ayanna's words hung heavy in the air. Across the park, the teenage boy watched everything unfold. His name was Elijah, 16 years old, soft-spoken, and always observant. He had been raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still made time to teach him about dignity, history, and standing up for what's right. He never imagined he'd witness something like this in real life. He never thought he'd see someone who looked like his older sister tied up like that, while the people doing it laughed. But what made it even more surreal was that woman in the suit. He didn't know who she was, but the moment she arrived, it was like the whole world shifted. As the sirens grew louder, a second set of cruisers pulled up to the park. This time, the officers who stepped out looked confused but serious. They weren't laughing. They weren't smiling. They walked over to the scene slowly, one of them recognizing the Attorney General immediately. His hand dropped from his belt. He nodded in respect. The crowd had grown larger now. People had gathered from all corners of the park. Phones were still up recording. Mothers held their children closer. Joggers had stopped mid-stride. An elderly man in a lawn chair had tears. His eyes, a woman whispered, "Isn't that Ayanna Monroe? She's the one who helped get that wrongly accused man out of jail last year." Someone else nodded. "She works for the state. She's not just some random girl." Elijah stepped closer, still clutching his backpack tightly. The note from the pregnant woman was still in there, sealed in a small envelope. He hadn't opened it, not because he forgot, but because something told him it wasn't time. That letter had weight, and today felt like the moment that would explain why. He watched as Ayanna's arms were finally freed. The rope fell to the ground like it didn't belong there, like it had no right ever being there to begin with. She rubbed her wrists but didn't look at the officers again. She stood tall and turned toward the Attorney General. The woman spoke quietly to her, so no one could hear. Then she gently put an arm around Ayanna's shoulders and guided her toward the sidewalk. That's when Elijah did something he didn't plan. He stepped forward, just a little, then a little more. "Excuse me," he said softly. Both women turned. Ayanna looked surprised, but the Attorney General's gaze settled on him with curiosity. "I saw the whole thing," Elijah said. His voice was shaking, but he didn't stop. "They didn't ask her anything. They just walked up and tied her, like she was nothing. And they laughed. They laughed like it was funny. Someone in the crowd murmured, "That's right. I saw it too." Another person added, "I got it on video." The Attorney General looked at Elijah. "What's your name?" Elijah Grant." She nodded slowly. "Thank you, Elijah." He swallowed hard. There's something else," he added, unzipping his backpack. He reached in and pulled out the envelope. "I know this has nothing to do with today, but a few days ago I gave my seat to a woman on the bus. She was pregnant. She gave me this note. I haven't opened it. But now, I think I should." He held it up. Something about the moment stilled the air around them. Ayanna stepped forward and took it gently from his hand. "Would you like me to read it with you?" Elijah nodded. But just as she was about to open it, a plain black car pulled up behind the police cruisers. Out stepped a man in a dark gray suit, broad-shouldered, polished, his expression unreadable. He moved with the same confidence as the Attorney General. Some of the officers stood a little straighter when they saw him. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that the Deputy Director? No way. Why would he be here?" The man walked straight toward Ayanna, the Attorney General, and Elijah. His eyes scanned the scene. The rope still lying in the grass, the crowd, the officers standing awkwardly with their hands clasped, and Ayanna, her wrists still red. Without breaking stride, he said, "We're opening an inquiry, effective immediately. No one leaves." The officers who had tied Ayanna looked like they wanted to vanish into the earth, but Elijah wasn't paying attention to them anymore. His eyes were locked on the letter in Ayanna's hands. She looked at him, gave a small nod, and slowly broke the seal. As she unfolded the paper inside, her eyes scanned the words, and her eyebrows rose. She read it once, then again. "Elijah," she said, glancing at him, "do you know who this woman is?" He shook his head. "She never said, just said thank you and gave me the letter." Ayanna looked at the Attorney General, then the man in the gray suit. "We need to talk in private," she said quickly. The Attorney General nodded. "Come with us." Elijah followed them, his heart thudding. Behind him, the crowd began to buzz with curiosity. No one knew what the note said, but from the look on Ayanna's face, it changed everything. And as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, the rope still lay in the grass, untouched. Whatever was written in that note, it wasn't just important, it was dangerous. Never judge someone by their appearance, race, or situation, because you never truly know who they are or what power or truth they carry. In this story, an innocent woman was humiliated and mistreated simply because of assumptions made about her. But when the truth came out, the same people who acted with power and arrogance were left ashamed and powerless. The key messages are, every person deserves respect, no matter who they are. Uniforms and authority do not give anyone the right to mistreat others. Those who stand for truth and justice always rise in the end. And most importantly, even a small act of kindness, like giving up a seat, can change a life forever.